We're now in the custom setting area of the menus. The custom setting menu also has multiple banks where you can pre-program in certain types of shooting. The shooting menu, how I mentioned, had the 4 different banks, if you will, were specific to the shooting menu. Well, now you go into the custom menu and you have the same option. You've got 4 different banks that you can choose from, and you can, again, set everything up, name it for a specific type of shooting, and then instead of going through the entire menu to set things up, you just go from bank to bank under different circumstances. The next one down, the reset custom settings. Again, that's the same thing as in the shooting menu where you have the option of going back to factory default. Now, the first set of menus in custom shooting or setting is autofocus, and this whole sequence is geared specifically to the way the autofocus functions work. The first one being AFC, or the continuous focus mode. You have 3 options in that one. Release priority, which is their default, release plus focus, or focus only. So what that does is if it's in release mode only, even if the camera's out of focus, it will keep firing. If you're in release plus focus, it may get a shot or 2 out of focus, but it's also going to wait till it catches up, and then so you get this option of keeping things in focus more. If it's focus only, and if the camera can't focus, it just flat out won't shoot. So ideally for action type stuff, release plus focus is the best place to be.
Kind of a good middle ground.
Middle ground, exactly. And if you miss a couple shots, it's going to catch up and keep going as you continue panning. Now, on the other hand, the AFS focus priority selection, you're in single focus. You're saying, I want to make sure this image is in focus. So rather than being into the release priority mode, I set that one to focus priority. Dynamic AF area. This one is the one that, like I said, I shoot in the dynamic mode. Again, while I'm panning with the subject, dynamic will search the other focus areas around your selected one to make sure your subject stays in focus. Well, here's where you have the ability to customize that. It will shoot with the center or selected focus point and 9 surrounding ones, or 21, or 51. Now the 3D tracking, that's another really cool thing. If you're in 3D tracking and you're shooting a still subject, the camera's kind of like in a single focus mode, if you will. As soon as your subject starts moving, the camera's going to kick in and start continuously focusing to keep it in focus.
So can you think of a specific time that I would want to be in 9 points versus 51 points?
Great question. Yeah, there's a lot of times when you've got a really, really busy scene. And even though it's using the D technology and the G technology, looking for specific contrast between the subject and the background, if you've got a lot of information happening in that frame, you can narrow down the area. Say a group of birds are flying and I focused on a specific one. If I make that setting or the number of focus points active smaller, it's going to make sure that just what's within that area is in focus.
Okay.
So again though, if you've got a situation where maybe you're just learning panning on a sporting situation or wildlife, the more active focus points, the more chance you have the camera's going to lock on and keep it in focus even if it moves way out of your target area.
And this also affects just the number of focus points that appear, and every time I hit the cursor to change focus points, it
Correct.
jumps. So if I wanted to move from one side of the focusing screen to the other, the 9 points would be
the 9
good
points
for
follow
a fast
with
jump.
that. Exactly.
But 51 points, I'm going to be hitting every little point across the way. Is
Okay. Now we're getting 2 things mixed up, which that's a great question because a lot of people have that same situation. When you're in the dynamic, you've pre-selected the one focus, and it's picking all the ones around it based on just a cluster.
Okay.
The part you're talking about is when we're in the single focus point mode and we want to scoot from one to the other. The fewer focus points, the easier it is to get from one end to the other.
Okay.
And there are times when I'll have all 51 active, or there's times when I actually go to smaller areas simply because cycling through all those can take time and I might miss a shot because of that. But great, I'm glad you brought that up because we do get that question a lot. A4, focus tracking with lock on. Again, we're in a situation where we're panning with a subject. if something interrupts it, say a bird in flight goes behind a bush or a tree or a limb or something blocks our subject. You're shooting a car as it's moving and another car blocks it. This setting is how long the camera waits before it tries to reacquire focus.
Okay.
And again, this is a real individual thing, but for my shooting style and purposes, I've got that set for short. But it's, again, like I say, the camera's in focus, something blocks it, so it kicks out of focus. How long before it says, okay, I got to reacquire focus? I want it to be really responsive and fast, so I have that set for short. AF activation. Well, when you depress the shutter release, you're activating the focus as well. We talked about the AF on in the back of the camera. If I push that, I'm doing the same thing. But then as soon as I push the shutter button again, it may refocus depending on how I've got it set up. You have the option of activating only the focus through AF on and disengaging it in the shutter button. So you're focusing from the rear and simply depressing the shutter when you're ready to shoot. Now, AF point illumination. What that does is it actually, if you're in auto and the light dims, it will automatically kick in and illuminate the focus point for you. Or you have the option of having it where it's on all the time, or if that's distracting for whatever reason, you can turn it off entirely. Moving along, we've got a few more to go. Focus point wraparound. Brad mentioned, here you are in 51 point focus and you're trying to cycle from one to the other and you're clear at the right side and you find that you need to now get to the left side. Wrap will make the focus point just simply jump to the other side. So if I'm at the right side, I just hit the right button once more and it immediately jumps to the left. Same with up and down. Now the other point that he had brought up is the AF point selection, and when you're cycling through all those, I have the ability of setting this camera to either 11 points or 51.
So that's where.
That's where you set that part. It was just further down in the menu. And there's, again, multiple settings. So one is the cluster, which is the dynamic. This is the individual point selection where you're setting which one you want. You have either the choice of 51 to choose from or 20 or 11, excuse me. We've got the built-in AF illuminator that we had talked about. Here's where you can set it to either activate or not. I leave it on for all situations, again, except when I'm trying to do candids and it's potentially low light. Then I'll turn it off because I don't want to draw attention to myself. I'm trying to capture more natural expressions on people. And the last one in the autofocus menu is AF on for MBD10. Brad's got an MBD10 here attached to his camera. So he's got the same capabilities of disengaging the shutter release in the vertical section on his grip and then only activating the AF on. So that's specific to if you have the vertical grip.